Releasing in Australian cinemas this month, in fact, it's on release now, is a film called Inside. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the writer-director of Inside, Charles Williams. Charles, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
Now, Charles, I know you've made a number of short films, and you won the short film Palme d'Or award at Cannes. What was the inspiration and journey behind making this first feature film for you?
Well, it sort of grew out of that short film. But it just grew out in the hardest way it could, which was that instead of just doing the smart thing or the lazy thing, which is just extending a short film, which I've seen a lot of filmmakers do, but I've never loved the features that result from a short film that you just kind of stretch out. I wanted to take the things that were still really interesting to me, that I was happy with about the short film, things that were still obsessions of mine, uh, certain themes and even aesthetics and relationships, and then start from scratch and go, okay, well, if I was in a cinema and watching a feature, how would I want these things to be realized? What would I want to see here? So it's really starting from scratch, but from a place that definitely did grow out of the short film, and had just been lifelong obsessions for me, I suppose, as well. I remember David Lynch saying, you can only really talk meaningfully about your obsessions. And I think he's right. And if you're really trying to, I'm very aware, you sit down to write a film, it might never get made. And if it does, you don't know how many you're going to. So you want to make it count. And so I thought, like I just want to dig in and try to make something that's that I have some authority to talk about, that I really, really care about, and that I feel like I can make a good movie out that I'd like to see.
Yes, no, it's a really good film. I was quite intrigued by the characters and the story, and it's set largely in a prison, and it features, of course, Guy Pearce, as well as a very good cast. So, tell me about that process of being able to get production behind you to be able to make the film.
Well, it was a long journey. I think, I mean, I'd spent many years before I even brought producers on, doing early development on a few drafts of the script and starting a relationship with Corrections Victoria so that I could be attending different prisons, talking to a lot of different inmates, talking to staff, and all of those things. The process of getting, the producers and production and international partners is probably a boring one to hear about, but I guess it's really a long journey of putting together a house of cards and trying to make it not all fall apart. You're agreeing upon something that doesn't exist yet, and it's only happening because of the faith of those involved that it is going to exist. And so there you have, sales agent from France, and you have an investor in Finland, and you've got Screen Australia, Screen New South Wales, Film Victoria. You've got a lot of these people that are investing, and they all have different reasons that they're investing. It's not like they're not all investing because of Guy Pearce. Um, so it's a tricky thing, and then it's tricky also when I don't make it too easy by also saying I want the lead of the film to be someone who's never acted before or never been on a film set before. And I want to film in a real prison, which comes with a lot of constraints. And I want to have former inmates on set, which is also something that's very difficult to add to the mix. And I want to work with a lot of officers that have never been on a film set. So half the cast have never been on a film set. And then you've got a couple of very experienced actors, and it's already hard enough to make a movie, and then I think sometimes to make it really good, you have to it's even harder. Like you make more constraints.
Well, well done on persevering and getting it done. It's that's great news. Yes, it's the journey of a young prisoner played by Cosmo Jarvis, and I what I was really
Oh,
interested.
Vincent Miller.
Vincent
Vincent
Miller,
Miller.
sorry,
Yes,
Cosmo was
yeah, yeah,
the I think was he the born again Christian?
that's right. Yeah, he's the
Yeah,
Pentecostal. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mixed the two up. Sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
but but it reminded me a little bit. I don't know if you know the film Earn Profit,
Yeah,
the French film. So
yeah.
so getting that journey for the prisoner and experiencing things that are going to change his life. I mean, that is such an intriguing way that Inside develops that story.
Yes, I think A Prophet's one of the great prison films up there with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and there's they all have slight different subgenres. Like A Prophet's sort of an action film as well as a prison film. Cuckoo's Nest is sort of more closely to a prison genre, albeit more of a prestige prison genre. In that, it's again the same thing of someone wanting to escape prison and the authorities being corrupt, which is essentially the two ingredients that make a prison genre film. And mine doesn't have either of those. So it's more of a film, I would say it's more of a crime drama with a bit of thriller, but it's in the prison world. Um, but I didn't really draw any inspiration from prison movies. I think when you get into production design, you start looking at visually, like what other filmmakers done in that space. And that's the only time something like A Prophet came up because it's one of the few prison films that's actually pleasant to watch. Most are just like miserable because it's just gritty and awful. And A Prophet has a spiritual element to it, which elevates it above just the antagonism of the world itself. And it's a great director, obviously, Jacques Audiard. Um, I think things that were more inspirational for me on this film, there was a lot of documentaries that were very inspirational. Um, and there was some Dardenne brothers films that were of some inspiration, but it was sort of contrast. It wasn't like Dardenne are very social realist, and the film isn't. So it was bringing that with other elements. There were films that were about sort of love triangles to me that were very inspirational, even something like The Piano, or for me personally, in a way that will make no sense to anyone. This movie over here, The Earrings of Madame D, which is a real favorite of mine, Max Ophuls' film,
Yeah.
in that you just have somebody torn between two opposite men and the complications of their relationship. So there was those kinds of references. Another great documentary called Streetwise, which is a total masterpiece. Um, so there were lots of things, but I think you're not really emulating one film or one genre. Or at least I'm not. I like to just bake a new cake out of very different ingredients.
Well, well done on that because it certainly does that. And I was so intrigued by Vincent, Cosmo, and Guy in particular. Did you rehearse with them or work with them before you started shooting? How did that process work so that they could all nail their characters?
It's completely different for each one, um, which is both surprising but also obvious because the film, I mean, they're designed to be very different characters, polar opposites in a way. There's a little bit of Vinny's character in Cosmo and a little bit in Guy, and Guy and Cosmo's characters are the polar opposites. So naturally, if you're casting it well, you're casting actors who are going to have polar opposite ways of approaching their work. And so with Vincent, yeah, there was a lot of, I spent a lot of time with him and a lot of sort of rehearsal and a lot of, just a different process. Like I sort of wrote him his own kind of script that was different from everyone else's and had a lot more, I would say, suggestive direction in it. And, and then there's a process of not just helping him as an actor, as a director typically, but also helping him as someone he was only 15 years old playing this and he's never been in this environment before, let alone a prison. So it's more so about just making him feel comfortable that he can take up space in the environment and that you're not being bullied by time's money and everyone's running. That no, time's not money and nothing matters if this isn't interesting. We're not here to burn through takes. We're here to discover something good. Otherwise, what are we filming? So there's a bit of a process to just empower Vinny a bit, as well as helping him with the character. Um, Cosmo comes from a very different process, very analytical and very, very hardworking, rigorous process. So he really interrogates things and is fun to work with. There's a real collaboration there, but there's also just giving him his space and feeding him information. And Guy is sort of the opposite. Guy is like about a year of just conversations, really, of I guess just talking more personally about our own lives and and it's not analytical. And then you get into a sort of more of a practical aesthetics approach towards each scene. And there's lots of little things you do along the way to give everyone what they need to be as great as they can be.
Well, they all work so well together, and you've done a great job in especially with 15 years old. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
Vincent was that age. He looked older,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
he did well. Yeah, yeah, well done.
Yeah, he's remarkable. Yeah. I couldn't have expected him to have as much talent as he does. I was looking for, certain qualities, but the fact that he has he's such a good listener and such a good learner, that I think he's a really formidable actor and will go on to be one. Yeah.
Yes, and the other issue, of course, is shooting inside an actual prison. Now, tell me about the challenges you had with that.
Well, it's sort of unprecedented. Like it never happens. Obviously, prisons don't want to be filmed inside of. The security protocols are enormous. But to me, if I had to shoot in a decommissioned prison, it almost wouldn't be worth making. Like you would just end up with another prison story with like everyone. The environment of a decommissioned prison is so onerous and miserable and gritty that the movie would have to be about how onerous and miserable and gritty prisons are. And that's not what the film's about. So I was fortunate through my years of collaboration with these different organizations. I found out that they just built a new prison and it hadn't been occupied yet, even though it was completely fully staffed and operational. And we still had to do the same protocols. But through a very long and lengthy process, I managed to allow us to film there. And then I also managed to allow us to film a tiny little bit into a juvenile detention center that was closing down at the time. And our section that we filmed in was closed off and closed down. And that was important too, because they look different and they feel different. When you see Vinny at the start of the film leaving juvenile, you can see that this is even more high security than adult prison. Every time he goes through a door, it's two doors double locked, two officers. It's the prison ratio of guards to inmates in juvenile is 1 to 1. So if you've got 100 kids, you've got 100 staff, 100 guards, officers. Whereas in like medium security adult prison, you have murderers in there, but you'll have 80 men for 4 officers. So, there's very few officers in adult prison. And these things are very important to the feel of the story. And only by filming in like a real modern day prison can you get all those details correct.
Hmm. Oh, how interesting to hear all that. It's yeah. How long did it take to shoot?
We had a 25-day shoot schedule in the end. It unfortunately, like we started with a longer one and then unfortunately got trimmed and trimmed. So there's a real challenge to still being able to realize the story of this scope and ambition and something that's very nuanced with characters in a very compressed amount of time. So yeah, it was challenging for sure.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, well done on that. I mean, we're not going to reveal some of the twists and turns that happen later in the film. People should see the film inside for themselves to experience that. But I did want to ask you, I found the relationship between Guy Pearce's character and his son, played by Toby
Mm.
Wallace, a very interesting situation. I found that really well written because it is a dynamic that is an interesting one to explore.
It is, and actually, that's the first scene I wrote. Um, that was originally going to start a movie. I just didn't know where to take it, and then it found its home here. And yeah, I'm proud of that scene. I don't think it's often that you can have a scene that goes for more than 10 minutes by itself and hold properly in a movie. It's quite difficult, and I think the scene really holds. And Toby's outstanding in it. Um, and Guy, it's a real, reckoning. Um, but I like that it's its own little mini movie. It has its own shape to it, and yeah, I was proud of the writing of it as well. It was I think it really holds an audience.
Yes, no, well done on that. Now it's great to see the film is on release in Australian cinemas. Getting distribution for Australian film is not necessarily easy, so well done on that.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, it's not even just distribution anymore. It's also what kind of distribution you have. There's a kind of oh, technically we've got distribution, and you get a 1 week or 2 week nominal release in a couple cinemas, and then it's off to Netflix. So to get a real theatrical release, that means that the film will stay in cinemas as long as people turn up before it goes into those other windows. That's something I'm really happy for. So hopefully people do turn up and then it does get to stay on a bit longer. But it's great to have a real cinema release because those things are disappearing, particularly for films that are made for adults and films with characters that aren't always likable. You know, that you make a film with deliberately make a film with characters that you love and then you don't, and then you know these kinds of stories are very you don't see them in cinemas as much as you used to. So I'm really happy that we got to achieve that.
Oh, well done on that. And yes, it's great to see it in cinemas, and hopefully it will have some longevity, but it deserves that. And I gather Inside can also have international distribution. It has that feel to it that it is a
Yeah.
universal story.
Yeah, we have a US release coming up in July. We're still playing festivals, and we have a pretty great festival launch there in June, which I'm not allowed to mention, but I'm pretty sure everyone could guess about what the big festival is in June over there. And then the UK, we will be doing a UK release as well. I don't know the date, but it's probably shortly after the US one. So yeah, I would like to, and then there's other festival rollouts happening this year. So it's interesting. I only just recently got back from Sweden and seeing it there with an audience was, it's always a really amazing thing to see something you've made so specifically not just Australian, but I would say regional Victorian travel. And it was like that with the short film. It was just so specific to one spot. And then you would be in Spain and people would be swearing. It was just like their own experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a uniquely cinematic thing. It's wonderful when something specific travels universally.
Oh, excellent stuff. Great to hear that. I'm intrigued by one thing. How did Vincent react when he saw the final edit of the film?
I mean, he's such a sweet person. He's not like the character in the film either. He's just his talent for empathy that he can inhabit it so well. So he was just a puppy dog and just so excited. It's not an easy thing. I think it took him the first two watches or so to actually even get close to watching the film. I mean, obviously, you can't help but look at yourself and wonder what is this working? What did I do? Um, and also when you're in it, you don't know what the music's going to be or not be, or the sound design, and so you're picking up on all of these other things. He was really thrilled, and I think and being Vincent, he's not a self-centered person at all. So he was mostly thrilled by just seeing what Cosmo had done and how it translated, and what Guy had done and how that had translated, and I think it's been a great experience for him, and I'm determined to make sure it stays that way.
Oh, excellent stuff. I'm sure he'll have a good career as an actor if he wants to do that. So that's excellent. Um, now, I'm intrigued now, Charles. Are you working on another film at the moment?
I am. In fact, as soon as we get off this call, I've got a call with the co-writer of this great American writer who wrote this incredible article years ago that has just captivated me. It's based on a true story, and we're working on it right now in adapting it. So that's an extraordinary story and an extraordinary film that's held me for years. And then there's another movie that I'm writing myself, which you'll be entertained to know is a musical. So I'm writing a musical based off a book that takes place in the early 1930s, and I'm writing this sort of true crime story, I guess. But it's not a what can I tell you about it? It's not a I guess like Inside is that it starts with a very clear premise of what you think it is. It's like Dog Day Afternoon. It's like, oh, okay, I get this. It's a bank robbery. And then you quickly just go, oh, wow, this is about something completely different. This is about some heartbreaking, funny, sad, tragic people who have got themselves into a tremendous mess. And the bank heist itself is sort of the engine, but it isn't really. You don't really care about the bank. It's all about human beings. And this particular story, the true story I'm working on, is like that.
Oh, all sounds very good. Looking forward to seeing your next films. They they sound really good. And I just want to ask you one last thing. What was the trigger or the factor that got you interested in being a filmmaker in the first place?
That's a tricky one. I'll try to keep it short, but I guess initially I was sort of a film obsessive just from being a very young child and just a little encyclopedia of movies. Um, and um, and I think I sort of had some difficult experiences when I was a kid, and when I started to see more adult movies, I was probably quite young, like 10 or 11, and started to see these R-rated movies and things. Um, it sort of opened up a window into a different art form completely. It wasn't like the movies that I was devouring all the time, which was sort of palliative, and you just didn't feel like you were troubled or in pain watching them anymore. You just disappeared, just an escapist thing. And then seeing films that were, I would say, still accessible and not super art house, but dealt with things um, that reminded me more of my world, even though it might be, it could be Goodfellas or something. You were seeing a movie, or you were seeing things that were more immediate to how you felt. And then I would say that that was the catalyst. It was just wanting to find a way to be a part of giving other people the same feeling I had from seeing such great movies. Not just in my teens, but up until today. I just don't think there's anything better than a really great movie.
Well done on that. That's a great journey, and thanks for describing that. That's a really interesting process. We've been speaking to Charles Williams, who is the writer-director of the film Inside, now on release in Australian cinemas. Charles, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.